There are many prominent figures of the 21st century who have adopted Eastern ideas. And by Eastern ideas, I mean predominantly Vedanta and Buddhism. And what is the difference between the two is a good question. And how can we understand these things in a very simple way? Well, both of them, that is Vedanta and Buddhism, Buddhism being derived from Vedanta in a certain sense, are both extremely simple. But once humans get hold of something, they make it much more complicated. And it's much better to strip things back into their simplest components for ease of understanding. And sometimes people learn better by giving an overview first and then going into the details. And even the overview can be divided into an introduction and a summary. So we can do that very easily, both with Vedanta and with Buddhism. But is there any literature we can pick up which doesn't introduce the human complication so that we can understand it easily? And then what's the point of understanding it intellectually? There seems no point unless you're going to apply some practical thing to your life. Many arguments really against spirituality, religion, philosophy, and so on is that's all very fine. What's the practical application? In science, the big discovery of the 21st century was the Higgs Boson. But then people asked, okay, what's the good of it? You can catch it in a small framework, a small frequency framework. It appears, it disappears quicker than you can really catch it and understand it. And if the answer is, well, it's a wonderful thing to have captured it in two separate locations and to verify there's some existence in the expected range, but then what does it do? Well, what it was supposed to do is lost. And so it creates more questions than answers. When we strip things back into the simplest components, Vedanta only says three things. Vedanta says there is an existent thing. We can, pick up some speculation even from ancient times. The Chandogya Upanishad in one section tells us, and just going back a little bit, if you want to understand Vedanta, you have to study the Upanishads. But the Upanishads are extremely difficult. If you want to understand Buddhism, you take the Dhammapada, you take the Tripitaka, the three baskets, and you study that. But all of it requires some kind of commentator to make it practical. In discussing the primacy of being, the Chandogya Upanishad asks a question that is obviously there from ancient times and is still there today. So in the beginning, there was that only which alone is one only. That's the first proposition. There is only one thing only, one without a second. And others say in the beginning there was only that one which is non-being alone. One only without a second. And from that which is not, that which was born. This highlights a big seeming contradiction between Buddhism and Vedanta. The Vedanta is saying there's only in the beginning one without a second, and even we give an apology for the word beginning. Now modern science is also, or cosmology is also saying, there is something called a singularity. No, that doesn't make any sense. Unless you understand something like, black vacuum physics, or, something like the understanding of is there any being in a void and all these kinds of things. And the answer is, we don't know. How can it be known? So time and space starts somewhere, but before that, where is it? No answer. In fact, some people say, that's a stupid question. Increasingly, therefore, people are coming to the conclusion that this Chandogya Upanishad is also coming to. So, but how could it be that it comes from nothing? How could that which is which is born of that which is not? How can something be born from something that is not there? Only that which is was in the beginning. Only one without a second. So now Vedanta is postulating three things I mentioned. Firstly, there is one being. It's existent. One without any second. No divisible thing. This is called non-dualism. But how to deal with people practically? We have to pick up from great saints, sages, wiser people than us, people who have experienced this truth firsthand. Such a person was the mystic Ramakrishna. So he was a non-dualist, no doubt about it. But when dealing with people, he introduced the sweetness of duality, seeing the personal God there, leading to a sense of compassion. And we can now dialogue now. I can now have some fun with you. I can have a proper conversation. This is dualism, and non-dualism doesn't mitigate against it. So the second proposition is that there is one being in you fundamentally. When you say, I own this, I have that, I have a body, I have a mind, I think this, I do that, agency and profiteering, both these kinds of things that we all experience. Well, what is that being? That being is, when you bring it back and reduce it, you say, well, I cannot be something that changes, cannot be the body, cannot be the mind. Mind is vacillating. Our thoughts are vacillating, our opinions are vacillating, our emotions are vacillating. So is there something that is fixed? Is there some entity that is observing it? And it helps to have a category, this and that. What do you mean? Well, we can sweep our hand to all the people and places and objects in front of us and say, all of this. What is all of this? You must have noticed that is a divided thing everywhere. And so, what is that? It means the thing which is not divided, that is not split up, that is not changing, that is not relative. And in the 20th century, the whole idea of things being fixed got shaken. Because it was soon realized that things look different depending where you stand. You take 1905 already, Einstein understood this, and somebody called Lorentz understood it also and said, there's no such thing as fixed time and fixed space. Where are you standing? And so we understood that long ago, of course. When I say we, the Eastern philosophers understood this long ago and brought out the idea, well, nothing is fixed, everything is changing. And so what is the thing that is fixed? It can be described as that which is invariant from every relative point of view. The thing that never changes from any point of view. And that leads then to outstanding people in the 20th century, Einstein being one, who takes up a philosophical position that is elucidated by Spinoza, who essentially is talking about Vedanta. He's saying there is only one being. There's not a nature and a God separate. There's nothing like, that's a Cartesian thing, a duality. That creates many, many complications. No. What we see as the changing thing called nature, including everything you can possibly think of, all of that seems to have a beginning, but the beginning has something behind it that is fixed. We call it that, tat. We have a phrase, tat tomasi, thou art that. And so there cannot be two infinites. There cannot be two ultimates. There cannot be one ultimate that we call Brahman, the first proposition. There cannot be a second thing separate to it. They must be the same thing. When you discover who you are, subjectively, fundamentally, with great deal of exploration, accompanied by empirical experience of, I am that, then you realize that there is no separate origin and there's no separate individual that comes out in 8 billion variations as people and more. So the second proposition is, this Atman and this Brahman are actually the same thing. Well, why would he have separate names for it? Because you're understanding it from two separate ways. One is that there is an overall cosmic entity beyond the cosmos, transcendent, and that there is something that, according to my exploration, is the self. Atman means self. Brahman indicates, by virtue of its sound, something that is capable of infinite possibilities and infinite expansion, infinite potentiality. Where does it so-called expand to? It's just a concept. It comes out as nature, the thing which is categorized as the this, as opposed to that. Now we understand this through discernment. And so the text of the Chandogya Upanishad will go on to say, being alone is a kind of a story, this ultimate self, one without a second, thought. Now, in order to think, there has to be some kind of mind, some kind of apparatus for it. And so it's assuming that you know that from this comes some kind of, in the relative world, a cosmic mind that has a creative capacity. From this potential comes this thought potential. And then thought, what did he think? Well, may I be many. In other words, there's not some separate created thing. I myself be many. Now, this is Einstein's admiration of Spinoza, because he understood this has to be the case. When as soon as I understand relativity, then I must understand there must be many relative positions. And where is it all coming from? There must be only one universal phenomenon, with one universal entity behind it. Then we come across other giants in the 20th century. Niels Bohr, Heisenberg, Oppenheimer, many of these, all of these would have had to refer to the Vedanta in one way or another. In other words, they're deriving Eastern thought. This was nothing new, because the ancient Greek philosophers also did it. And they took these ideas, evaluated them nicely, and so you have Platonic idealism, for example, and things like that. So this idea of East and West, no cross-pollination, is a myth. There was always cross-pollination. It just gets served up in different ways. If you emphasize the Abrahamic way, then you'll say this world is actually a reality, but after this world is a greater reality. So there's a kind of linear destination. If you take the Eastern approach, you say, well, it's more a kind of circular thing. It's more like a tree growing from a seed, that kind of thing, and perpetually growing. So that affects everything. It affects the whole way of thinking. These are not two contradictory things. They're just simply two different ways of looking at the same thing. Vedanta has the third postulate, and that says, this relative world is actually mithya. It is only an apparent thing. We shouldn't take it so in a real way. And if we want to really understand that more, because our great understanding today will be through the fundamental science of physics. And physics is looking much, much more like this Vedanta. Much, much more like this an apparitional universe. It doesn't feel like that. We don't relate to it like that. Why is that? Because we're looking at it from the point of view of outside and identifying inside with outside and not making that discernment. So these three postulations, although I've elaborated a little bit, are very simple. We can review it again. There's only one entity. The entity in you is one and the same with it. And thirdly, this world is a relative world. It comes and goes like the breeze, and like the weather, like the clouds. And you must have noticed it. Don't take it as seriously as you're taking it. Because that one without a second is not just a theoretical entity. When explored, it now becomes the panacea for everything. It now becomes the area, as it were, of bliss. Because within that, there's no second thing. We only have a problem if there's a second thing. And so the story goes on, being alone thought, may I be many, may I grow forth, and send kind of fire means radiation. Now we see in modern cosmology, we'll understand that. Despite the problems with that, never mind, send forth some kind of heat, some kind of kinetic energy that results in some kind of radiation. Yes, we all agree on that when we look at the cosmos. And you must have noticed that you're a certain body temperature. You must have noticed that you're in a land of, let's say, 30 degrees centigrade. And you're sweating. And that fire thought, may I be many, may I grow forth, and send forth water. Yes, we understand the drama of that. And therefore, when anybody, anywhere is hot and perspires, very relative to yourselves at the moment, water is produced from fire alone. There's a kind of simple explanation. Then water thought. Now, how can water think? How can fire think? It's because inside is a conscious thinking entity, a supreme thinker. May I be many, may I grow forth, and it sent forth food. That is the earth. And so therefore, in this kind of dialogue between a son and a father being the teacher, therefore whenever it rains, food is then produced. And from water alone is food produced, and so it goes on. We can take any example in our normal everyday life that we summarily call nature and understand how this developed, what the relationship is, but primarily we cannot draw a line anywhere. We have to go deeper beyond the border and say there is only one without a second. Now, Buddhism has this same understanding. The problem is when humans get hold of a thing and try to make it complex and complicated, then you have many different varieties of Buddhism. Now, within the Vedanta, 3 varieties may be there, but none of them are contradictory. They're all because they take in the relativity of perception. Firstly, we experience diversity everywhere, and we experience ourselves as a psychophysical entity in relation to it. It's an erroneous position, never mind. It's a position that we all experience. How to get over this and discover the deeper entity? We have to take seriously these 3 propositions that I've outlined in the Vedanta, and we have to then go along a course of disciplinary action called spiritual life, spiritual endeavor. One of the courses would be meditation, the most profound way to look inside and discover. And then not only inside, but inside and outside has no boundary to it. And we can take the position of dualism if we like. We can also see the connectedness, a kind of universalism if we like. And then we can come to the principle of non-dualism. These are 3 non-contradictory positions. Now, when it comes to Buddhism, we find there is a realism involved in it. there is an idealism involved in it. In other words, there's a materialism involved in it, an idealism involved in it, and a nihilism involved in it. And the Vedanta scriptures manage to combat the positions left and right. There are theories of many different schools from ancient times and even today. Materialism, atomism, realism, idealism. This is all different schools of Buddhists. And so we have to criticize the Buddhists a little bit for it, but not Buddha, because Buddha had it right. He had it straight. So we can consider this method, the interpretation of the Vedic propositions given, such as Tattvamasi, thou art that, and I am Brahman, Brahmasmi, these great Mahavakyas. They're indispensable for our correct understanding and for scriptural revelations. But the most important feature of the Vedanta consists in putting the knowledge of the truth to the test in your own life. And that then is to do with yogic practices. We find the word yoga still also in Buddhism, but different schools of thought, proliferating even in the time of Buddha. Now, if you take the Dalai Lama, for example, that's one variety of Buddhism popularized by the personality of the Dalai Lama. A wonderful communicator. And so it looks as if Buddhism is that, but no, it's only one leg, as it were, one approach. The approach is very, very close to the approach of the Vedanta. It embraces everything, doesn't change anything, adds to it. That's all. Underneath it is Buddhism. When Buddha sent missionaries out, that was the idea. Or when Ashoka sent missionaries out, that was the idea. Don't disturb what is there. Keep Buddhism there and, whatever is there culturally, and put Buddhism on the top of it. So then there is the Theravada Buddhism, but we have to, and the Mahayana Buddhism, and so it goes on. But we can strip it all back and say, what did Buddha himself say? Is it a simple thing? The simplest thing of everything. So he's saying, I'm not getting involved in theology and God and all the rest of it. I'm simply observing and telling you about my observations. Number one, there is suffering in this world. Huge suffering. There is pain. Secondly, don't be mystified by it. There is a cause of it. What is the cause of it? You are the cause of it. What do you mean? Well, you've misunderstood the world as it is. You've reacted to it. And your reaction has said, I want fulfillment. And so I have innumerable desires. And when each one is fulfilled, another one comes up. These are these great passions, the vasanas. Then is there a cure? Well, Buddha is a kind of medical man with a medical approach. Yes, there's a cure. You have to do away with these desires. How do you do that? Well, there is a method. We can make a method as simple as possible, and we can say 8 things, 8 practices are there. Why 8? Well, on 2 hands I can describe them. 4 noble truths, 1 hand. Practice, 2 hands. Finished. And then, of course, there are other things involved in that, yes. We can make an assembly, a sangha. Monastic life can be there, as well as householder life can be there. We have a formula for both, kind of rules for both. But the principle really comes back to these 4 simple things, 4 simple truths, all to do with something we universally experience. Now in Buddha's era, let us say, 2,500 and odd years ago, other schools of thought similar to that were present. One such school of thought was the yoga school of thought. And the yoga philosophy delineated with Patanjali Yoga Sutras are there in a kind of aphoristic way, taking that. So we can understand all these things from a simple thing. What literature should we take up? From the Vedanta point of view, we have to take up the Upanishads. We have to take up the Bhagavad Gita, which is much simpler. And we have to take up the Brahma Sutras, which is a systematization of the Upanishads. But a fourth thing is necessary. A teacher is necessary because the Upanishads are also in a way aphoristic, poetic, and a record of brief discussions, and so subject to many interpretations. So a teacher has to be there. A competent teacher has to be there. The Bhagavad Gita is much more simple. 18 chapters, that's all there is. And but each one is a brief series of stanzas because it's a poem. And that also requires a commentary. And the Brahma Sutras can be also studied. Now, Brahma Sutras is a little complicated. Upanishads are a little abstract. So we're left with the Bhagavad Gita. Then, of course, we have more modern sages that bring things up to date. For example, the Ramakrishna. Unfortunately, we have conversations, so we have the English translation of Kathamritam, which is called Gospel of Ramakrishna. We can study that. And by studying that, we can actually take all the ideas of scripture. We can use the method in any scripture whatsoever. And Lectio Divina, we can pick it up and open at any point with a preceding kind of alignment of the mind that says, I have every faith and confidence that what I open up is a revelation to me. Divine revelation. Pick it up, pick up a passage, read it, meditate on it, reflect on it. And there you see something very useful. Do it systematically, do it on a daily basis. And that is a good way of studying it. That means we're not reading books like novels. Scripture is not supposed to be like that. Scripture is the story of somebody who says, I have experienced it and you also can experience it, and here's the method, here's your manual, here's your toolbox. So we can understand all scriptures in this way, but scriptures are divided into two sections, Shruti and Smriti, and all scriptures will mainly come into the remembered section, in which case we have to refer to the Shruti for the reliability, in this case, namely the Upanishads. What about Buddhism? In Buddhism, we have to understand that there are different schools of thought. But all of them have to be referred back to these Four Noble Truths and this Eightfold Path to get any validity. There are even schools of thoughts in Buddhism which says, we got this revelation from Buddha 2,500 years after, but we're quite sure that this was his hidden teaching. And so, all right, what is the basis? What is the reference point to say, is it true? And from our point of view, Buddhism itself will have to be evaluated from the point of view of the Vedanta, in other words, the Upanishads. Supposing you say, well, I'm a Buddhist and I feel there's a conflict with Vedanta and so on and so forth. It's all right. Then you have to refer to your own experience and come back to the most authentic fundamental sayings contained in the Dhammapada, probably, to see what does Buddha actually say and what did he mean, and can we reflect on it in exactly the same way as we reflect on any other scripture. And also, not only that, but is it a reasonable thing? In other words, does it go against the phenomena of materialism, which doesn't make any sense in Buddhism or Vedanta, Does it go against idealism as a closed circuit philosophy? Because that doesn't make any sense, either in Buddhism or Hinduism, Vedanta. Does it go against atheism as such? What do we mean? Well, Buddhism is supposed to be an agnostic or atheistic religion. It's okay. But what do we mean by God? What we mean by God is the embodiment of full freedom. You may call it God if you like, but if you feel God, the word comes with baggage, you leave it off. The main thing is, in both systems, you're identifying that which doesn't change. And in Buddhism, it is called Buddha. That is a state of enlightenment, Buddha consciousness, if you will. And in the Vedanta, it is called, the discovery of the divine self, the Atman. Making a confusion, Buddhism says we don't believe in Atman, but what they mean is we don't believe in any objective egoistic self. When Vedanta talks about Brahman Nirvana, and Buddhism only talks about Nirvana, it just leaves out the Brahma part, it's essentially the same thing. When Buddhism talks about, particularly Northern Buddhism talks about the void, they're not talking about non-existent. When they talk about emptiness, they're not talking about real emptiness, no more than modern science can talk about real emptiness anyway. Supposing you take a volume of space, it looks empty, but actually we know it's teeming with potentiality. It's teeming with virtual particles. And so space itself is alive. Where does the liveliness of space come from? Then we have to go back and understand from scripture that it is in fact, and comes from what is called agasha, potential matter. And it is energized through prana, which is universal energy. And all of these things, if they are true, will be verified and have been verified by modern science. We acknowledge it will solve many different problems, by the way. So I don't know if I answered your question, but except that whatever we read, either in terms of the Vedanta or in terms of Buddhism, has to come back to the basic principles and the authentic texts. Anything I say, if it's from me, don't take, because whatever I'm saying is found in some authentic text book somewhere. That's how we teach it. If somebody comes up and says, oh, it came out from thin air, we'll say, okay, there's nothing original. We must have it backed up by a bibliography. You write an important scientific paper, then you'll have to have a comprehensive bibliography to support it. You pick up a book, and if there's no bibliography at the back, there's a person saying, this is my original idea. No, it cannot be. There's nothing new anywhere. If it is true, it is eternally true. It always has been true. It is true now. It will always be true. Well, I don't know if I answered any of this. Or if I just...
It was very good and very good. I love going back to the principles, because I think we need to hear them again and again.
Yes.
I have a follow-up question, and I know you talked about this many times and we asked you many times, but what are some good practical ways to go from the dualist to the non-dualist attitudes? Because we have a body, we still think about this separate. Even if I think of divine as an energy, I still think it's separate from this body. Even if I repeat to myself that it's not, I don't know if I progress. When I face to stress, I probably realize that I haven't realized it yet, because I still think of myself as separate.
So the idea of non-dualism is it's a practical tool when needed, but it's not always needed. So when life becomes the toughest it possibly can, non-dualism is the way out. Now, how do we experience it? Well, we understand it intellectually, but the way to come close to it empirically will be to follow dualism. Dualism is the road to non-dualism. Now, the ancient people bypassed it totally. They were able to do that. They were all jnana yogis. They said, we don't have to go through the gateway. What is the gateway? The gateway is what we call God or cosmic mind. You understand, cosmic mind and God are the same thing, personal God. So we take the sweetness of the duality and don't worry about the non-duality. Leave it in the background, put it in the unconscious cupboard somewhere, but understand that basically it is there. There is only oneness. Let us take, for example, areas of great, great difficulty, such as wars or cruelty. These are difficult things. So we can't ignore them. We can't just dismiss them and say, well, it doesn't exist. That's not non-duality at all. But what it's saying is, they exist, but only for a moment. They exist only for a small period of time, relatively speaking. But the other side of the coin to non-dualism, in other words, the not this. The opposite side of not this is this manifesting thing. So everything that we see from a dualistic point of view, we can understand is like an adapter. A face looks at you. What is it? You're like a light bulb beaming. It's not the light bulb itself, but the fact that there's a life behind it. Recognizing that is equivalent to seeing God in all beings, in all creatures. The practice of non-dualism is, and that's more than the principle, the practice of non-dualism is seeing the divine in every being, in every circumstance, in every event. That's the practical side of it. Now, is there a dualism involved in it? Yes, because we can take the sweetness of that and understand that the personal God is there peeping out at you, looking like a face, looking like a person. And so we actually combine the two, and we learn, of course, from the great sages around Krishna. As I mentioned, he was a non-dualist, but in dealing with people, he was a dualist. There's no contradiction in it. And we can then shift around a little bit. We don't have to take the one and not the other. And when things are difficult, when either difficult problems or the difficult events in life, we can take out our non-dualistic tool and say, Lord, you are everything everywhere. It's not the elimination of the relative. It's the assertion of the universal, expressed as the relative. Now, in the depths of meditation, we then dissolve everything into the non-duality. But that's a natural process that is going to happen. So we take the dualistic God like a keyhole and say, okay, there's a small keyhole beyond which may be an exotic garden. We can't see it. But the more we look through the keyhole, the more of the garden is exposed, the more of the non-duality is exposed. And what we mean by that is we mean something that is not non-existent, but something that is existence itself, something that is consciousness itself, existence itself, and something that is bliss. We don't normally experience that, but we experience aspects of it. In this world, we experience things are living. This is called existence. But the difference between pure existence and the relative existence is relative existence comes and goes. Your birth, life, and death. Whereas absolute existence is always there as a fundamental. We take consciousness. There's a great debate. Is a worm conscious? Well, we can leave all that aside, of course, you know. If you poke a worm, it'll react. Why is it there? Why is it there? And unfolded through evolutionary processes as a human is because our fundamental nature is consciousness. And we see how it is expressed. What is the nature of light, divided up into so many wavelengths and colors, is because there's one pure white light behind it. It doesn't look like that. It looks separated. But the one unity is standing there. So we can conceive of it, no doubt. We can put it in a conceptual thing. But you see, everything we see is that. There's nothing else. We're going to leave it there, yes, so you can enjoy your Sunday. And if you happen to have sunshine, think it is the Lord of the universe beaming out at you through the sun. That shining, all other things shine. This is a quotation.
Wow.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Om